When I turned 65, I threw a party for the family. A real dinner party. Cloth napkins, name cards, the good china. I spent 3 weeks planning it. 3 whole weeks choosing the perfect menu, arranging for fresh flowers in the dining room, calling everyone to make sure they'd be there. I even bought a new dress, navy blue, with pearl buttons up the front. Caleb always said that style made me look elegant. I wanted to look elegant. I wanted to feel like someone people came to celebrate. The table was set for 8. Place cards in my best handwriting. Caleb Whitaker, sweet Aiden, who'd just turned 7, little Lily, 5 years old and always clutching a stuffed bunny, my sister Nancy, her husband Don, and me, at the head of the table where I could see everyone's faces. I had it all pictured in my mind. Smiles, toasts, laughter floating through the house. I even imagined Lily falling asleep in someone's lap. Aiden begging for a second slice of cake. It was supposed to be perfect. By 6:30, no one had arrived. I refreshed my lipstick, checked my phone, convinced I must have gotten the time wrong. But there it was in my calendar. Birthday dinner, 6:00 p.m. I'd sent out a reminder just 2 days before, a cheerful group text filled with smiley faces and heart emojis. At 7:00 I started calling, first Caleb, straight to voicemail, then Sierra. Same thing. I tried Nancy next, confident she'd answer. She always picked up by the second ring, but even she didn't. That silence, the absence of even a ringback tone, made my chest tighten. I stood in the dining room staring at the empty seats, the untouched plate. The candles I'd lit an hour earlier were half melted, flickering with a strange sort of nervous energy. The roast in the oven was going cold. My chocolate cake, dense and moist, the way Aiden liked it, sat untouched on the kitchen counter. Maybe something had come up. Maybe there was traffic. Maybe, I whispered to myself, maybe there was some emergency and they'd call soon to explain. But deep inside I already knew. By 8 hours it wasn't a maybe, it was fact. No one was coming. Not Caleb, not Sierra, not even Nancy. I sat down slowly in the chair at the head of the table, the one I'd imagined myself smiling from all evening. Instead, I just stared at those empty chairs. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't lateness. This was a decision. The silence in the house was no longer peace. It felt hollow, like the walls were holding their breath, waiting for me to do something, anything, to break the spell. That's when I made the mistake of checking Facebook. At the very top of my feed, glowing bright on my phone screen, was a photo that made my stomach twist. Sierra, radiant in a white sundress, standing on a ship's deck, her arm wrapped around Caleb, who looked happier than I'd seen him in months. Behind them stretched the glittering blue of the Caribbean. The caption read, "Living our best life on the high sea, so grateful for this amazing family getaway." I scrolled further. Aiden and Lily building sandcastles on a pristine beach. Nancy and Don sipping cocktails at what looked like a luxurious cruise lounge. Everyone smiling. Everyone there. Except me. The timestamp on the photos showed they'd been posted just an hour ago. At the same time I was sitting alone, watching candles melt and roast turn dry in the oven. They were sipping champagne under the sun, laughing, celebrating, without me. I felt something deep in my chest, not break, exactly, but crack. A slow, cold fracture, like ice giving way on a frozen lake. This wasn't just an accidental oversight. Sierra had orchestrated this. She planned a family vacation on my birthday and made sure I wasn't part of it. She'd convinced everyone, Caleb, Nancy, even the kids, to go along. And they had, even Nancy. My sister, who had helped me pick out the napkin rings just last week, she'd been part of it too. I stared at Sierra's smiling face, positioned squarely at the center of the group, surrounded by my family, the place I should have been. My phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. "Sorry, Mom. Forgot to mention we'd be out of town this week. Sierra booked a surprise trip. Happy birthday, though. Forgot to mention." As if a Caribbean cruise was something you casually forgot to tell your mother about. As if scheduling it on my birthday was just an accident. My hands trembled. I set the phone down gently, afraid that if I held it any longer I'd hurl it across the room. I walked to the kitchen and turned off the oven, moving like I wasn't inside my body anymore, like I was watching from a distance. A quiet observer seeing a woman in a navy blue dress clean up a meal no one came to eat. I wrapped the cake in plastic and slid it into the fridge. I blew out the candles. I loaded the good china back into the cabinet, one plate at a time. The sound of porcelain tapping against porcelain seemed too loud, like it echoed against every surface in the house. Sierra had won something tonight. I didn't even fully understand what we'd been competing for, but whatever it was, I'd lost. Because for the first time in my 65 years, I didn't feel overlooked or even forgotten. I felt erased. When I turned off the dining room lights, I caught my reflection in the dark window. I looked smaller somehow, diminished. That woman in the glass had been the family peacekeeper, the one who remembered birthdays and anniversaries, who mailed cards and picked up gifts, and bit her tongue when Sierra got sharp. That woman had spent her life believing that putting others first meant they'd one day return the favor. She'd been wrong. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, each step heavier than the last. The air in the house seemed denser somehow, like grief had crept into the walls and settled there, pressing inward. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to. The hallway was familiar enough by feel. The pictures of Caleb at various ages, the floral wallpaper I'd refused to update, the faint scent of lavender from the sashes tucked in my dresser drawers. In my room, I sat on the edge of the bed in the same navy blue dress, my hands resting in my lap. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just sat and let the silence wrap itself around me like a too tight shawl. Tomorrow, I knew, would be full of apologies and thin explanations. Sierra's bright, overly careful voice would try to frame the trip as something spontaneous. We booked it months ago. There wasn't anything we could do, Helen. Caleb would offer some weak variation of the same. We didn't mean for the dates to overlap. It just happened. But tonight, there was no one here to perform for, no one to convince me that what I felt wasn't real, and what I felt was betrayal. Deep, complicated, suffocating. I didn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the familiar cracks in the ceiling, tracing patterns I'd ignored for years. My mind refused to rest. It kept circling back, not just to the birthday dinner that never was, but to other moments, subtle, odd moments, that had unsettled me at the time, but that I'd dismissed. Aiden's 4th birthday. I remember the thrill of being invited to the party, the excitement I felt wrapping his gift. A picture book I'd once read to Caleb when he was little. I'd arrived at the venue, gift bag in hand, heart full, only to find Sierra at the door, her smile stretched tight across her face. "Oh, Helen, didn't Caleb tell you? We had to reschedule for tomorrow. Something came up last minute." Behind her I heard children's laughter, the music of celebration. I saw balloons floating against the ceiling, and cupcakes already half eaten. When I called Caleb later, he seemed confused. "Tomorrow?" "No, Mom. The party's today. Didn't Sierra tell you?" And then, Lily's first day of kindergarten. I'd asked Sierra multiple times what time they were doing drop-off, eager to bring my camera and capture the moment. "Oh, we're doing it super early, like 7 a.m. It's probably too early for you, Helen. You don't have to worry." But I'd shown up anyway, early and hopeful, only to be told by the teacher that Lily had been dropped off at the regular time, around 8:30. I missed it. Her tiny backpack, her nervous glance back before stepping into a classroom that marked the start of something big, a moment that should have been shared. And then last Christmas, how Sierra had called just days before. "Caleb's really overwhelmed at work," she said in that perfectly constructed tone of reluctant empathy. "We're keeping Christmas small this year. Just the 4 of us. It's nothing personal, Helen. We just want to give the kids a calm day." So I'd spent the day alone, eating reheated leftovers, watching old holiday movies. I could nearly recite. I tried not to look at my phone, but I did. Because of course I did. And that's when I saw it. Photos on Nancy's Instagram. A glittering Christmas party at Caleb and Sierra's house. More than 20 people in attendance. Neighbors, friends, co-workers, and Nancy, right there, smiling in the center of it all. Everyone was there. Everyone except me. Each memory came back like a puzzle piece I'd once overlooked. The more I examined them, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't bad timing or misunderstandings, or life just happening. This was deliberate. And Sierra, no, Nadine, though I hadn't yet uncovered that truth. She was the constant thread tying all of it together. Around 5:30 the next morning, I gave up trying to sleep. I shuffled into the kitchen, wrapped myself in a shawl and made coffee. The bitterness of the brew suited my mood. My hands still trembled as I lifted the mug to my lips. But beneath the sadness, a new feeling was beginning to stir. Not rage, not yet, but awareness. A grim, awakening clarity. I picked up my phone and opened Sierra's social media accounts. I wasn't looking for comfort this time. I was looking for evidence. And I found it. There she was, beaming in the front row at Aiden's school play. Caleb had told me it was canceled due to a flu outbreak, and Sierra had confirmed it in a breezy tone. Just a rehearsal, nothing important. Yet here was the proof. Aiden center stage, his painted costume crooked on his shoulders. Sierra grinning like the world's most devoted mother. There she was, again at Lily's ballet recital. The one I'd been told was a low-stakes practice, not worth the fuss of an audience. But the photos showed otherwise. Full stage, seats packed with parents, Lily in pink tulle, Sierra with her hands clasped to her heart. There were dozens more. Holidays, birthday parties, school of always the same characters. Caleb, the kids, Sierra, at the center like a sun pulling them all into her orbit. And me? I wasn't in any of them. If it had only been one or two incidents, I might have kept finding excuses. I might have kept forgiving. But the pattern was undeniable now. I wasn't just being overlooked. I was being pushed out. Carefully, strategically, and with intention. Sierra didn't need to turn Caleb against me with harsh words or dramatic scenes. She did it with silence, with little white lies, with subtle refrain. Your mom seems a little overwhelmed lately. Do you think it's still safe for her to drive long distances alone? She didn't remember Lily's teacher's name when I saw her last week. I'm a little worried. She chipped away at Caleb's perception of me with 1,000 paper cuts, small enough not to draw immediate notice, but painful all the same. And it worked. I remembered the way she hugged me at family gatherings, always just a beat too long, the way she'd smile as she rubbed my back, whispering, "So glad you could come," in a tone that made me feel like a patient who'd wandered too far from the ward. I remembered how she redirected the children's attention anytime they got too close to me. "Grandma Helen's had a long day, sweetie. Why don't you show Daddy your drawing instead?" And Caleb, my Caleb, who used to call me twice a week just to talk, who used to bring the kids by on Sunday afternoons, who once leaned on me for advice about everything from work to diapers. He didn't see it happening. He didn't notice how the ties were being gently, methodically cut because he trusted her. And because I did too. The phone rang just as the sun began to push pale light through my kitchen window. The screen flashed Caleb, and I stared at it, my heart a slow thud in my chest. For a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail. But I answered. Of course I did. "Hi, Mom." His voice was cheerful, carefree, the kind of voice that didn't belong to someone who just skipped their mother's birthday without warning. "Just wanted to say happy belated birthday. Sorry we missed it, but the trip's been amazing." Sierra really pulled off something special. I gripped the phone tightly, knuckles aching. "Yes," I said slowly. "I saw the photos. Oh, good. She's been posting like crazy. The kids are having a blast. Aiden learned to snorkel yesterday. And Lily made a little friend from Seattle. You would have loved seeing them. Would I? Because from my side of the screen, it looked like no one had even noticed I wasn't there. Like I'd already been airbrushed out of the frame. It looked like it was very last minute," I said carefully, not trusting myself with anything more. "Totally spontaneous," Caleb replied, chuckling. "You know Sierra. She's always been like that. She saw the deal online and just jumped. That's one of the things I love about her. She makes things happen. Spontaneous. That's what he called booking a cruise during his mother's birthday weekend. That's what he called dragging two small children, Nancy and Dawn, and probably half a dozen suitcases halfway around the world without a word to me. I opened my mouth to say more. Something, anything. But the words stopped short in my throat. What could I tell him? That his wife was manipulating him? That she'd spent years subtly pruning me out of his life like I was a withered branch? He wouldn't believe me. Worse, he might. And the thought of shattering what little peace still existed between us. It froze me. Everything okay, Mom? You sound off. I closed my eyes, pressing my thumb into the edge of the countertop until I felt the sting. I'm fine, sweetheart. Well, get some rest, he said warmly. We'll be back next week. I promise we'll plan something special to make it up to you. A promise I knew Sierra would find a way to dissolve. After we hung up, I sat for a long time at the kitchen table, the mug of coffee growing cold in my hands. I thought about the years ahead. More missed birthdays. More milestones I'd only see through social media. More events explained away with a smile and a line. The idea of that slow, quiet disappearance made something twist deep inside me. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even anger yet. It was something else. Something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Resolve. For 8 years after my husband died, I'd survived. Alone, but not unloved. At least I had Caleb. I thought I did. I thought I mattered. But now I felt like a ghost, haunting the edges of my own family's life. And then it happened. Tuesday morning, 1 week after my ghost birthday, I was still in my robe, nursing my second cup of coffee when the doorbell rang. The sound startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. Visitors had become a rarity in the past few years, especially unannounced ones. After Sierra's slow campaign to make me invisible, most people simply stopped showing up. I peeked through the peephole. A man I didn't recognize stood on my porch. Mid-40s, maybe. Thick dark hair, swept back in a way that suggested it once mattered to him. Worry lines carved deeply into his forehead. He was dressed nicely, coat, slacks, collared shirt, but rumpled, like he'd slept in it. His hands were buried deep in his coat pockets, and he kept glancing around, as though unsure whether to knock again or run away. I almost didn't answer. I wasn't in the mood for door-to-door salesmen or missionaries or strangers with clipboards. But something about him, the way his shoulders hunched as if carrying something too heavy, made me pause. I opened the door a crack, leaving the chain in place. "Can I help you?" I asked, voice guarded. He looked up quickly. His eyes were dark, bloodshot, but kind. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said carefully. "Helen Whitaker, Caleb's mother." A chill slid down my spine. "Who's asking?" He hesitated, then exhaled like someone who'd been holding his breath for too long. "My name is Jason Park," he said. "And I need to talk to you. About Sierra." I stared at him. The chain between us suddenly felt flimsy, too thin to protect me from what was coming. "What about her?" Jason's hands trembled as he pulled them out of his coat. "This is going to sound crazy," he said, "but I think, no, I'm almost sure that my son is living in your son's house." The words didn't make sense at first. I blinked at him, unsure if I'd heard right. "What are you talking about?" I asked slowly. Jason's voice dropped to a whisper. "Aiden," he said. 7 years old, brown hair. Scar on his chin from a bike fall when he was 4. The air left my lungs in a sudden rush. The scar. Caleb had told me about that. How Aiden had flipped over his handlebars, and they'd rushed him to the ER. But how did this man know? I undid the chain and opened the door fully, a sudden nausea curling in my gut. "I think you'd better come in." He stepped inside carefully, like a man approaching a fragile floor. Jason sat stiffly on my sofa, hands clasped so tightly in his lap that his knuckles turned white. I offered him coffee, but he shook his head. His voice was raw when he finally spoke again. "I don't even know where to start." "Try me," I said. "I've had a very strange week." He let out a bitter laugh, then nodded. "I knew her before Sierra Langley. She was with me. For 2 years. We were serious. We lived together. Talked about marriage. Then she got pregnant." I sat back, my breath catching. Jason's eyes filled with something that looked dangerously close to tears. I was thrilled, he continued. I wanted to get married right away, build a life. But she kept stalling, saying she needed time, wasn't ready. And then one day, I came home from work, and she was gone. Gone? I echoed. He nodded slowly. Her clothes, her toothbrush, the photos we took together, vanished. Like she never existed. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. The room around me felt like it was spinning too fast. I looked for her, Jason said. Filed a missing persons report. Hired a private investigator. Posted on every site I could find. Nothing. No trace. It was like she evaporated. And now, you think Aiden is... I stopped, unable to finish the sentence. My son, Jason said softly. Yes, I do. Jason reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out his phone. With slow, careful hands, he opened the photo app and scrolled for a moment, before holding it out toward me. This is me, he said, when I was about 6. I took the phone, and the breath caught in my throat. The child staring back at me from the screen had Aiden's eyes, that same deep, inquisitive gaze, the same crooked smile, same little dimple that only appeared when the grin was genuine. Even the slight gap between the front teeth was there, something Aiden had recently become self-conscious about, trying to hide it behind tight-lipped smile. I handed the phone back with trembling fingers. It could be a coincidence, I said, though my voice sounded uncertain even to my own ears. Lots of children resemble others. It doesn't mean... I told myself that too, Jason said, over and over. But then, I started digging, really digging. His voice sharpened, shedding its hesitation. I hired another investigator, better this time, not just to find Sierra, to understand her. I leaned forward slightly, and what did you find? Jason looked me straight in the eyes. Her name's not Sierra Langley. It never was. Her real name is Nadine Holt. She's 34, not 31 like she told Caleb. She aged out of the foster care system at 18, and has no known family, no ties. She's moved from place to place every couple of years, always reinventing herself. I stared at him, the weight of his words settling heavily over me. She's done this before, Jason continued. Disappeared when things got difficult. Left when people started asking too many questions. The investigator found 2 other men. 2, both had long-term relationships with her. Both were ghosted when she was pregnant or suspected to be. The walls of my living room seemed to close in around me. Everything was spinning too fast, yet also grinding to a slow, terrible crawl. Why are you telling me all this? I asked. Why now? Jason's gaze softened. Because I'd been watching from a distance for 3 months, trying to figure out what to do. Trying to decide if I had the right to blow up a child's world over something I only suspected. He looked down at his hands, his voice quieter now. But then I saw the cruise photo. All of you smiling. Everyone but you. I blinked. What? I looked through Sierra's social media, Nadine's, post after post. Birthday parties, holidays, school events. You're in none of them, Helen. Not one. It was like you weren't even part of the family, and I realized I knew what that felt like. The truth of that hit harder than I expected. I folded my arms across my chest, not because I was cold, but because something inside me felt suddenly exposed. She isolated me too, Jason said, his voice tinged with something bitter and old, made me doubt my own instincts, convinced me that my friends, my parents didn't understand us, that they were against us. She controlled what I knew and who I saw. And when I started asking the wrong questions, poof, gone. She's doing the same thing to Caleb, I said, barely above a whisper. Jason nodded. And to you? He reached into his bag and pulled out a manila envelope, thick and sealed. This is why I came, he said. This is what made me stop waiting. What is? I asked, even though I already knew. DNA results, he said. I managed to get a hair sample from Aiden. His barber keeps the clippings on request for sentimental parents. I submitted it, had it tested against mine. He held the envelope toward me. His hands were shaking. Mine were too. I got the results yesterday, he said. I wanted you to see them first. I stared at the envelope, afraid to touch it, because whatever was inside had the power to unravel everything I still clung to. The fragile, wishful version of my family I'd been pretending still existed. Before you open it, Jason said softly, I need you to understand something. I'm not here to take him away. I don't want to rip him out of his life. But I also can't stand by while she manipulates and lies to everyone who loves him, including you. My fingers brushed the corner of the envelope. What are you asking me to do? I'm asking for help, Jason said. Not just for me, but for Aiden, for Caleb, for Lily, for you, because Nadine's not done. She doesn't stop not until she's taken everything she can and left people broken behind her. He leaned forward. And if Aiden really is my son, he's not the only victim here. You are too. Outside, a car door slammed and the laughter of children rang out from somewhere down the street. My neighborhood had always felt peaceful, safe, but nothing felt safe anymore. Not when I thought about the way Sierra Nadine had infiltrated our lives so quietly, so thoroughly. I looked down at the envelope. My hands had gone completely still. Are you ready to know the truth? Jason asked. I thought about Aiden's freckled face, about the way he used to wrap his arms around my legs and shout with wild delight before Sierra began discouraging that kind of affection. I thought about Lily, whose timid smile had become rarer the more Sierra controlled her world. I thought about Caleb, the boy I raised, the man I loved, who now looked at me like I was slowly fading from relevance. I thought about all the birthdays missed, the parties redirected, the whispers behind my back, and how I'd let it happen. All of it. Because I'd been too afraid of what asking the real questions might uncover. I looked up at Jason, then slowly peeled the seal from the envelope. The envelope crackled as I pulled out the contents. 3 pages, stapled neatly in the top corner, printed in the cold, clinical font of a laboratory report. I skimmed the first page, my eyes locking on one line, halfway down, paternity probability, 99.7%. I blinked, reading it again, then a third time, hoping the numbers might magically shift, that I'd misread them, that there'd been some kind of clerical error. But the words stayed the same. Jason was Aiden's biological father, not Caleb, not my son. The little boy I had read bedtime stories to, who had fallen asleep in my lap during movie nights, who had called me grandma before he could even form full sentences. He wasn't mine, not by blood. I placed the papers on the table as gently as if they were made of glass. I'm sorry, Jason said quietly. He sat across from me, watching with solemn eyes. Not gloating, not angry, just waiting, giving me space. How long have you known? I asked, my voice barely a breath. Since yesterday, he said. But I've suspected for a long time, ever since I saw them in Portland. I nodded slowly. The resemblance is undeniable, he said. I looked at him, at his jawline, his eyes, even the way he ran a hand through his hair when he was nervous. Aiden was him. There was no more doubt. How did you find them? I asked. Jason glanced toward the envelope, then back at me. By accident. I was at a conference 3 months ago, just walking downtown on my lunch break. I looked up and saw Nadine, or Sierra, I guess. She was holding Aiden's hand, and I swear to you, Helen, it was like looking into the past. He swallowed hard. I followed them for 3 blocks. Not close, not threatening. I just watched. That boy, he walks like I did, tilts his head when he's curious. Even the way he laughs, I knew. The room around us was still, filled with the weight of his revelation. My heart was breaking, not for me, but for Caleb, for the betrayal he hadn't yet discovered, and for Aiden, who was being raised in a house built on lies. You've been following them? I asked cautiously, from a distance. I didn't want to scare them. I just needed confirmation. I hired a private investigator again, a better one this time. We traced Sierra's identity, found Nadine Holt, found her history. Jason leaned forward, and that's when I knew I had to come to you. Why me? I whispered. Why not go directly to Caleb, or to the court? He sighed and looked down at his hands. Because she's already poisoned everything. If I'd gone straight to Caleb, he would have thought I was trying to take his son. Or worse, He would have told her, and she would have vanished again. With Aiden, I nodded. He was right. I could feel it in my bones. Nadine Sierra was a flight risk, a woman who survived by burning her past to the ground and disappearing into someone else's future. You're his grandmother, Helen, Jason said. You may not share blood, but you've been there. You love him. You're the one person I thought might understand what's really at stake here. His words struck me deeply. I did love Aiden. That didn't change. Not with a DNA test. Not with a name on a paper. I loved him with the kind of love that comes from scraped knees and bedtime stories. From tiny shoes left in hallways and sticky-fingered hugs after dinner. Jason opened his phone again and showed me more photos, taken from a distance, grainy, but unmistakable. Aiden riding his bike down the sidewalk. Aiden playing soccer in the park. Aiden skipping beside Lily, laughing at something she said. My throat tightened. He's happy, I said. Jason's eyes grew soft. He is, and I don't want to ruin that. I don't want to rip him away from what he knows, but I also don't want him growing up in a house of secrets. He deserves to know who he is, who loves him. And Nadine? Jason's expression hardened. She's dangerous in her own way. She doesn't scream or hit or slam doors, but she manipulates. She isolates. She makes people question their worth until they think they need her to breathe. I thought about the slow way she'd pulled Caleb away from me, how he stopped coming by, how the kids stopped calling, how I had to beg to be included in holidays that used to be mine to host. I've felt that, I admitted. I know you have. That's why I came to you first. He stood and pulled a business card from his wallet. That's my number. If you decide you want to help me, to help Aiden, call me, but be careful. If she even suspects that you're asking questions, she'll shut you out faster than you can blink. I took the card with unsteady fingers. He paused at the door. One more thing. I looked up. She's not done, he said. Not with Caleb. Not with you. If we don't stop her, she'll keep cutting you out until there's nothing left. You'll be a story they barely remember. Then he left. I sat in the silence for what felt like hours. The DNA report lay on the table, heavy as a tombstone. The business card nestled against my teacup, waiting. Outside, the world went on as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. Aiden wasn't Caleb's son. Sierra wasn't who she claimed to be. And I wasn't going to be silent anymore. 3 days after the family returned from their cruise, I made the call. I'd rehearsed it in my mind so many times that, by the time I pressed dial, the words felt like memorized lines in a play I never asked to be cast in. My voice was steady, unshaken. It had to be. Hi, sweetheart, I said when Caleb picked up. I was wondering, could we have dinner together this weekend? All of us. You, Sierra, the kids. I'd really like to see everyone. There's something I want to talk about. There was a pause on the line. One of those long, silent beats where you can almost hear someone's thoughts working through suspicion. Everything okay, Mom? You sound serious. Everything's fine, I replied smoothly. I've just been doing some thinking about the future, about our family. I think it's time we had an honest conversation. There was muffled movement on the other end, and I caught the distant hum of Sierra's voice, low and urgent. Caleb returned a moment later, his tone more cautious. Sierra wants to know what kind of conversation. She's concerned about the cruise timing. Of course she was. She was always concerned when it served her. Tell her I'm not upset about anything, I said sweetly. I just think it's important that we communicate, openly. Saturday night would be perfect. Let me check with her and get back to you, Caleb said. The fact that my son, 38 years old, needed permission from his wife to have dinner with his own mother, said more than I ever could. 2 hours later he called back. Saturday works, 6 o'clock. Perfect, I said. I'm looking forward to it. And I meant it, not because I was eager, but because I was ready. Friday passed in a blur of preparation. I met with Jason again. We went over everything. The documents, the timeline, the strategy. We agreed on what to say, and more importantly, what not to say in front of the children. We weren't doing this to hurt them. We were doing it to protect them. The truth was sharp, but hiding it had already caused too much harm. The DNA results went into a folder along with the rest: copies of marriage certificates, under the name Nadine Holt, court records from previous divorces, photos of Sierra, no, Nadine with men she'd left behind like forgotten luggage. Saturday evening arrived draped in gray clouds and drizzle. Classic October weather. I cooked Caleb's favorite meal: pot roast, garlic mashed potatoes, green beans with lemon, and sea salt. Comfort food. Something that said, "This is still home, even if everything else was about to change." At exactly 6, the doorbell rang. Right on time. Of course they were punctual. Sierra would never risk being late for something she hadn't yet figured out. I opened the door with my best hostess smile. Sierra stood in front of me in a soft cream dress, her hair carefully curled, her face immaculate. She looked like she belonged on the cover of a parenting magazine, polished, perfect, poised. But her eyes flicked quickly across my face, searching for something. Aiden burst in first, still bubbling from the trip. "Grandma Helen, I learned how to swim. Want to see my doggy paddle?" My throat tightened as I hugged him. His arms around me felt as familiar as ever, but I knew tonight would change the way I looked at him forever. Not with less love, but with heavier knowledge. "Maybe after dinner, sweetheart," I said. "Go wash your." Lily followed him, holding a small bouquet of daisies, their stems wrapped in a paper towel. "These are for you," she said shyly. "Daddy said yellow is your favorite." I knelt down, taking the flowers in my hand as gently as if they were glass. "They're perfect, sweetheart." "Thank you." Caleb stepped inside last, his hug firm. A touch rushed. "Something smells incredible," he said. "I've missed your cooking." "You look tired," I said, stepping back to study him. He did. The shadows under his eyes were deeper than before. His shoulders slouched in a way I hadn't seen since he was a teenager cramming for finals. "Work's been insane. The merger is dragging on forever. But Sierra keeps telling me I need to take more breaks." Sierra, who had just stepped into the living room, added cheerfully, "I've been encouraging Caleb to think about early retirement. Maybe take some time for family travel. He's given so much to that job." Early retirement. At 38. Of course, another way to pull the last root of independence from the ground beneath him. I smiled. Tight and polite. "It's good to think about the future." Actually, that's what I wanted to talk about tonight. Dinner started off like any other. The kids talked nonstop about the cruise, Aiden describing the waterslide in dizzying detail, Lily showing me a small shell she'd brought back. Sierra played her role flawlessly, cutting food into bite-sized pieces, wiping crumbs off faces, smiling at all the right moments. But I saw the edge, how she redirected Aiden when he started to mention missing me, how she steered Lily away from asking why I hadn't been on the ship, how she maintained control without ever raising her voice. After dessert, apple pie, Aiden's favorite, I asked the children to play in the living room. "Oh, they should probably get going soon," Sierra said quickly. "Tomorrow's school. And this won't take long." I interrupted gently. "And what I need to say, it's not for them to hear." Her eyes flicked just for a moment. That was just a split-second shift in her mask. But I caught it. Fear. Back in the dining room, I sat across from Caleb and Sierra. The manila folder lay beside my coffee cup, like an unexploded bomb. "So," Caleb said, reaching for Sierra's hand, "what did you want to talk about?" I folded my hands in front of me and looked at them both. "I want to talk about the truth," I said. "About honesty. About what it means to be a family." Sierra's smile tightened. "That's a bit heavy for after dinner, don't you think?" "No," I said calmly. I reached for the folder and opened it. Neither of them moved, but the air in the room shifted, denser, charged. "These," I said, sliding the DNA results forward, "are paternity results for Aiden." Caleb blinked. Sierra went perfectly still, her hand frozen in his. "A paternity test." Caleb's voice was thin. How did you— "The test shows that you're not Aiden's biological father," I said softly. "Jason Park is." The silence was immediate and deafening. Caleb stared down at the papers in front of him like they were written in another language. The words didn't seem to register. He didn't touch them, didn't blink, just stared. Sierra Nadine stood so fast her chair scraped harshly across the floor, her hands clenched at her sides, and her face lost all its practiced softness. Gone was the calm, maternal expression she wore like a costume. In its place was something sharper, darker. A flash of panic, barely hidden behind composure. "This is insane," she said flatly. "Helen, I don't know what kind of cruel stunt you're trying to pull, but I'm not going to let you tear our family apart." I looked at her evenly. "Sit down, Nadine." The name hit her like a slap. Her face paled. She took one involuntary step back before catching herself. Caleb blinked, finally looking up. What did you just call her?" "Nadine Holt," I said, my voice clear and unwavering. "That's her real name. Sierra Langley is an alias. One of several. I have the documents to prove it." I slid the rest of the folder forward. Marriage certificates, divorce decrees, court records, the timeline that proved what I already knew. Aiden wasn't born premature. He was conceived before Sierra ever met Caleb. She had needed a husband, quickly before the lie could unravel. Caleb reached with trembling hands and flipped through the first few pages. I watched his face as understanding dawned in slow, shattering waves. His eyes scanned the paperwork. His lips parted as if he might say something, but no sound came out. Sierra didn't speak. Not yet. Her gaze darted toward the door like she was calculating something. I raised my voice slightly. "Jason has been trying to find Aiden for 7 years. He found you 3 months ago. He's been watching from a distance, terrified that if he came too close, you'd vanish again." Sierra's jaw clenched. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You have no proof. The DNA test is legally admissible." I said calmly, "You can challenge it in court if you'd like. But you won't, because you know it's true." Caleb pressed both hands against his forehead. "This isn't happening," he whispered. "Tell me this isn't real. Sierra, tell me." Sierra moved slowly, deliberately. She sat down again, smoothing her skirt like that small gesture might somehow reassert control. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was syrupy with false empathy. "Caleb," she said, "I love you. That has never changed. Aiden is your son. You've raised him. You've loved him. That's what matters." "You lied to me," he said, staring at her. "All these years, everything was a lie." Her eyes shimmered with the beginnings of tears. "I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have anyone. And then I met you, and you were so kind. So stable. I thought this is someone who will love us both." "You used me," he said, barely above a whisper. "You used our son as leverage." "He is your son," she insisted, desperate now. "He thinks of you as his father. That hasn't changed." "Except I'm not his father," Caleb said, slamming his palm against the table so hard the dishes jumped. "You let me name him after my grandfather. You let me believe he was mine." The emotion in his voice cracked something inside me. I had never heard my son sound like that, so gutted, so betrayed, so lost. Sierra turned to me then, eyes flashing. "And you, how dare you go behind our backs like this? You've always hated me. You just want to destroy what we've built." "What you built," I said coldly, "was a house of cards. And you used my son and those children as glue to hold it together." She stood again, rage rising behind her eyes. But she didn't speak. She couldn't. Not without giving more away. "There's more," I said quietly. Caleb looked up, stricken. "More?" I handed him the rest of the report. "You weren't her first. Or her second. She's been married twice before. Both ended with large settlements and sudden exits. She moves quickly, isolates her partners, burns bridges, and vanishes." Sierra's voice turned sharp, bitter. "You have no idea what I've been through. None of you understand. I had nothing. I survived the only way I could." "At whose expense?" I asked. "Jason's? Caleb's? Aiden's?" At that, something flickered in her expression. Not guilt, defensiveness. "Everything I've done has been for my children," she snapped. "Your children," I echoed. "Except one of them isn't even your husband's, and the other barely knows me because you've spent years pushing me out of her life." Caleb leaned back in his chair like he couldn't hold his own body up anymore. "The cruise. he said slowly. You planned it to fall on Mom's birthday, didn't you? Sierra didn't answer. Her silence was its own confession. You wanted her alone, Caleb continued. You wanted to hurt her. I wanted peace, Sierra shouted suddenly. I wanted a break from her constant judgment, her always showing up uninvited, her little comments. I never judged you, I said, my voice trembling with both anger and grief. I let you into my family. I gave you every benefit of the doubt, and you made me feel like I didn't exist. From the living room, we heard laughter. Aiden and Lily, still playing, still unaware that the ground beneath their childhood was fracturing. Caleb pushed back from the table. What do I tell them? He asked. What do I tell my children? I stood and reached across the table, laying my hand over his. We tell them the truth, slowly, gently, with love. Aiden is still your son in every way that matters. You raised him. You are his father. That hasn't changed. But someone else is his father too, Caleb said bitterly, and he wants to be in his life. That can be a good thing, I said softly. If we handle it right. Sierra turned toward the doorway. You're not going to get away with this. She said. You think Jason is some kind of saint? You don't know him. You don't know anything. Then we'll learn, I said. We'll learn together. Without you, if we have to. She walked out of the room without another word, her heels clicking sharply against the tile. The door closed behind her with a final quiet thud. Caleb stood in the middle of the dining room, shoulders sagging. I saw his eyes wet with tears. His world had just collapsed. But for the first time in years, he wasn't standing in it alone. We'll figure this out, I said gently. We'll find a new way forward. A real one. Behind us, the sound of Aiden's laughter drifted through the doorway, innocent, unknowing, and still, impossibly full of love. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen peeling apples for a pie when I heard the front door open and the unmistakable sound of Aiden's voice calling out, Grandma, we brought dessert. His footsteps thundered down the hallway like a tiny herd of elephants. He burst through the doorway with a bakery box clutched in his arms, nearly as wide as his torso. Behind him came Lily, more delicate in her approach, carrying a small bouquet of daisies wrapped in brown paper. She smiled shyly and held them out to me. These are for you, she said. Daddy said yellow's your favorite. I knelt and took the flowers, inhaling their soft scent, before pulling her into a hug she no longer hesitated to return. They're perfect, sweetheart. Thank you. Caleb entered. He looked like a different man than the one who had sat shattered at my dining table that October evening. The gauntness in his face had softened. His eyes no longer looked hollowed out by doubt and guilt. He'd put on a few pounds. He laughed more easily now, too. Behind him came Jason, who still moved with a kind of cautious reverence whenever he entered my home, like he was afraid to break the balance we'd worked so hard to rebuild. Something smells amazing, Caleb said, leaning over to kiss my cheek. Is that your apple pie? I smiled. Of course. Special request from a certain 7-year-old. Aiden beamed. And mashed potatoes. Right? Like the kind Daddy likes? I glanced between Caleb and Jason, my heart twisting in that new, complicated way it always did, when Aiden casually used the word daddy for both men. It still surprised me sometimes, but kids adapt, faster than adults ever could. Aiden had started calling Jason Daddy Jason a few months after the dinner. Not because we told him to. Not even because we encouraged it. It had just happened. Organically, as if some part of him had always known there was another piece of his puzzle waiting to be filled. Jason, for his part, had never tried to take Caleb's place. He showed up, consistently, gently, with patience, not expectations. Lily adjusted more slowly. She was still young and Jason was a newer presence in her world, but she accepted him now the way she accepted the weather, or her favorite teacher, like he was simply part of her life's backdrop, and maybe always had been. Jason placed a bottle of wine on the counter and smiled. Need help with anything? You can set the table, I said. The good china's in the cabinet. It had taken months of therapy, of hard conversations, of uncertain steps forward, to reach this point. Months of Aiden asking hard questions, of Caleb wrestling with his pride and grief, of Lily waking up crying some nights, worried her mom might disappear again. Because she had after that dinner. Sierra, or Nadine I should say, didn't fight. Not in court, not in custody hearings, not even when presented with the evidence. Her lawyer negotiated a deal that allowed her to relinquish all parental rights in exchange for avoiding criminal charges related to fraud and identity theft. She vanished. Again. At first Aiden didn't understand. He asked about her constantly, then gradually less. Lily held on longer, but she never said her mother's name with warmth, just uncertainty. She was always mad. Aiden had whispered once, curled in my lap after a particularly emotional therapy session, even when we were happy, and I understood then what Jason had meant all those months ago. Nadine hadn't just manipulated the adults in her life, she'd shaped her children's memories too. But now, we had the chance to build something different. That after dinner. Chicken with herbs and lemon. Just like Caleb used to ask for when he was in college, we cleared the plates while the children watched a movie in the living room. They were sprawled on the carpet, heads touching, Aiden absently braiding strands of Lily's hair. The sound of their laughter echoed down the hall. Caleb poured coffee while Jason leaned against the counter drying dishes. These moments had become my favorites. Quiet, steady, simple. I spoke to my lawyer again, Caleb said. The divorce is officially finalized. I nodded. How are you feeling about it? He was quiet for a moment, thoughtful, relieved, and sad, I guess. Not for the end, just for the fact that it was never real to begin with. You gave it your best, I said gently. You believed in her. That's not a flaw, Caleb. That's love. Jason glanced toward the living room. Any word from her? None, Caleb replied. Her lawyer said she doesn't want contact. Not with me. Not with the kids. I expected to feel vindicated, but instead I just felt numb. She's missing so much, I said. They're incredible kids, and she's going to wake up someday and realize she let it all go. Caleb nodded. And by then, it'll be too late. Jason set the last plate in the cabinet and leaned back. I've been thinking, he said, about Aiden's last name. Caleb's eyes narrowed slightly. What about it? I'm not asking to change it, Jason said quickly. He's been a Whitaker his whole life. That's who he is. I wouldn't take that from him. He paused. But I was thinking, maybe I could take your name, formally, add it to mine. I looked up in surprise. You'd become Jason Whitaker. No, Jason Park Whitaker, he clarified. So Aiden and I would share something, a connection. But I'd still keep my identity. The gesture stunned me. It was so thoughtful, so balanced, so unlike anything Nadine had ever offered. Caleb reached out and shook Jason's hand without hesitation. I think that's perfect, he said. Later, after the kids were asleep on my couch, tangled in blankets and dreams, we sat at the kitchen table sipping coffee and quietly planning for the future. Our future. This strange, reassembled family of ours wasn't perfect. It was born from betrayal and pain, but it had grown into something resilient, something real. You know, Jason said softly, looking around the room, when I came to your door, I was just trying to find my son, but what I found instead was this. He gestured around us, a family. My eyes stung. Me too, I whispered. After everyone left that evening, I sat alone in the living room with a cup of chamomile tea, the kind Caleb used to complain tasted like flowers when he was a teenager. The house was quiet now, but not the aching kind of quiet it had once been. Not the kind that felt like absence. Now it felt like rest. I looked around at the small things. The shoes by the door. Aiden's hoodie forgotten on the back of the couch. Lily's artwork still taped to the refrigerator with magnets shaped like fruit. Every corner of my home was touched by their presence again. By life. My phone buzzed gently on the end table. Caleb, thanks for dinner, Mom. The kids are asking if we can do this every Sunday. I told them that's up to Grandma. I smiled and typed back without hesitation. Every Sunday sounds perfect. This is what families do. A minute later, his reply came. Caleb, yes. This is what real families do. I looked down at the framed photo next to my mug. It had been taken at the zoo the previous month. Our first family outing after everything had settled into a new rhythm. The five of us stood in front of the elephant enclosure. Aiden was perched on Jason's shoulders, arms spread like wings. Lily held my hand tightly, her face mid-lap. Caleb stood behind us, one arm around Jason, and the other draped across my shoulder. He was smiling, not the careful, restrained smile I'd seen in so many of Sierra's old photos. This one was different. It was real. That picture didn't tell the whole story. No photograph could. It didn't show the weeks of therapy, the nights of tearful conversations, the confusion in Aiden's eyes when he first heard the truth, or the deep ache in Caleb's voice when he told me he felt like a fool. But it showed something else. It showed what we'd built, what remained, what mattered. I traced the outline of Lily's head with my thumb, then Aiden's outstretched arms. We weren't traditional. Not by any stretch. Two dads. One grandmother. A mother who had vanished. But we were honest, and that made us stronger than we'd ever been before. The day Sierra left, officially left, she didn't even say goodbye to the children. Her attorney sent a letter to Caleb, short, sterile. She'd agreed to relinquish all rights. No visits, no calls, no contact. At first I couldn't comprehend it. I thought no mother could truly walk away from her children so completely. But now, I understood. She hadn't wanted a family, she wanted control. And when she lost that, she lost interest. It broke my heart for Aiden and Lily, but it also freed us. For the first time, we were no longer living in reaction to her presence. We were simply living. Jason had rented an apartment nearby just 10 minutes away. He and Caleb co-parented with grace and surprising ease. They divided school pickups, dance recitals, soccer practices. They worked together on Halloween costumes. They coordinated birthday plans. Not everything was perfect. There were disagreements, tensions, tired days. But there was also laughter, respect, and a kind of peace that had never existed when Sierra was around. One Saturday morning, as we waited for Lily's dance class to let out, Aiden tugged on my sleeve. "Grandma," he whispered, "can I tell you a secret?" Of course. He leaned in close, like he always did when he wanted me to really hear him. "I'm glad I have Daddy Jason now, because now I have two daddies. That's more than anyone in my class." I chuckled. That does sound pretty special. He looked down, his voice softer. "I'm glad Mommy's not here anymore. She was always mad. Even when I did everything right." I pulled him into my arms, holding him as tightly as I could without crushing him. I didn't say anything, just held him, because sometimes, that's all children need, to be held when the world feels too complicated. Later I watched him run toward Jason's open arms, then turn and wave to Caleb, as he called across the parking lot about lunch plans. My heart clenched, not with pain this time, but with something fierce and beautiful, pride. We had been broken, that was true, but we had rebuilt, and what we created in the aftermath was far more solid than what came before. That summer, Jason filed to legally change his name to Jason Park Whitaker, not to erase who he was, but to honor what he was now part of. Aiden beamed when the paperwork came through. "Now we match," he said, clapping his hands. "We're both Whitakers." One evening after dinner, I pulled Jason aside in the kitchen while the kids built a blanket fort in the living room. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for telling me the truth, for trusting me with it." He looked surprised, then thoughtful. "I didn't know who else to go to," he said, "but I also knew you weren't gone. Not really. You just needed someone to say I see you." I wiped a tear from my cheek and smiled. "You helped save this family." He shook his head. "We did." As night settled over the house, I poured myself another cup of tea and curled up on the couch beneath the edge of the children's fort. I could hear them giggling inside, their voices muffled and full of joy. This house, once heavy with silence and sorrow, now hummed with life again. We weren't what I had expected. We weren't the family I imagined all those years ago when I first held Caleb in my arms and pictured future holidays with grandbabies underfoot and a daughter-in-law who'd become like a second daughter. But what we were was real. What we were was what we had was ours. Somewhere out there, Nadine Holt was likely spinning a new name, a new story. She might already be trying to charm her way into someone else's life. I used to wonder if she felt guilt, if she missed them, if she regretted walking away, but not anymore. She had her chance. She could have had this strange, patched together, genuine, imperfect, beautiful family, but she threw it away for control, her loss, our gain. So if you've listened this far, thank you. And now I wonder, what would you have done? Have you ever been left behind? Ever fought your way back into a place someone tried to erase you from? Tell me. I'll be reading. And tonight, as I turn off the lights and head upstairs, I'll do so knowing one thing for certain. After everything, every lie, every silence, every heartbreak, I am home. This story is ultimately about the quiet power of truth and the unbreakable bonds of real love. Through heartbreak, betrayal, and isolation, Helen Whitaker found something many people spend their whole lives searching for: clarity. What began as a painful unraveling of lies became the foundation for a stronger, more honest family, one built not on appearances but on trust, forgiveness, and the courage to confront hard realities. If there's one message to take from Helen's journey, it's that no one gets to erase your place in your own story. You can reclaim it. You deserve to reclaim it. Families aren't defined solely by blood or by the roles we're assigned. They're defined by who shows up, who chooses love, and who stays when things get hard. If this story moved you, surprised you, or gave you something to think about, please hit the like button. It truly helps support the channel and allows more people to discover stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. I post emotionally powerful, thought-provoking narratives, just like this one, and I'd love to have you join our growing community. If you feel inspired, consider sharing this video or supporting the channel through the links in the description. It goes a long way in helping me create more stories that resonate deep. Finally, I want to know where this story reached you. Comment below with the region or country you're watching from. It means the world to see how far these stories travel and who they connect with. Thank you so much for being here, and remember, no matter what anyone tries to take from you, your truth still matters.